Welcome, everybody. I'm Maggie-Ostara. Welcome to Sovereign Sisters Salons. And I'm delighted that you're here, and I want to welcome those of you who are watching the replay later as well. And everything that I say to people who are here live, I want to say to those of you who are watching the replay also, because we really like to hear from you, and we go back and read the comments later. So don't think because it's not live that your comments on Facebook are not valued, because they really are. Because I know a lot of people are watching our replays these days. So it's really great to hear from you as we're having these ongoing conversations. So the Sovereign Sister Salons are something that I have created so that I get to have great conversations with wonderful people like Darla Ledoux, who's here today. Yay! And we're really focusing on this topic of sovereignty, and feminine sovereignty is my body of work, and Darla's working with sourced energy, and she and I have been talking about sovereignty on and off for a decade. And we're really seeing this be something that people are working with a lot these days. And so this is an opportunity for us to have conversations and to take dives into what this means for individuals and for our communities and for our greater world as we are developing not just a body of work that's intellectual, but actually ways of being and ways of being with ourselves and with each other, interacting, being with the planet. It's really a movement about our empowerment. And so that's what we're talking about. So welcome, Darla. I wanted to say
Thank
hi.
you. Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great. And I can't wait to hear about what you're going to share today, because I want to know more. This is a relatively new expressed part of your work. I know it's been an aspect of your work probably all along. But
I was literally thinking that when you were talking about how we've spoken about sovereignty over the years, and I really learned sovereignty as a phrase from you like so many years ago. And this work that I'm really focused on now, it's kind of like it was born at that same time. I have been doing it all these years. And what I'm sensing, that we're both feeling is like the call to be really clear, specific, focused, and provide a way to make it accessible for people, even though we've been using it for a long time and talking about it for a long time.
Yeah. And so I want to say a few things about you and about us, and then I'm going to read your official piece so that people who don't know you yet will have that piece also. And those of you who are on Zoom, if you want to say hello, if you do, make sure you're speaking to panelists and attendees and not just to panelists, because otherwise other people won't see what you're saying. So if you do, feel free to chime in as you want to. So Darla and I have known each other for over a decade. We were in the same high-level mastermind together, and where I just say I learned so much in that mastermind. I really did, both from our coach and from each other and from that experience. And I really value what I got from that. I think most of my business training actually came through that mastermind and being with other people who were, serious about creating businesses. And you and I think we're always simpatico because we were very interested in a spiritual alignment and working in the flow with source, and helping people to realize that their spiritual foundation is the basis of a successful business and a successful life, really successful relationships. And without that, all the techniques in the world that you learn are only going to do so much for you. And I can say personally, for me, one of the things that I found is when I kind of got out of alignment for a period of time, I reached all of the material goals that I intended to reach. But because I wasn't always in alignment, I did not have the level of satisfaction or the happiness or the outcomes that I wanted in the end. So there had to be a big shakeup for me around that. And I think you and I are both, really aware of that. And so I've always appreciated that aspect of you, along with just you're super smart and savvy and creative, intuitive, all of that. So I'm happy to learn from you today.
Thank
And
you.
here's an official piece. Okay, so Darla Ledoux is a business coach, author, speaker, recovering engineer, which cracks me up. I'm like you're the recovering engineer. I'm the recovering academic, right?
Uh-huh.
The founder of Sourced and creator of Retreat and Grow Rich. She's co-creating a world in which transformational work is the norm, yay, and where each person's intuitive magic is valid, yay, valued and visible. Since 2009, Darla has helped thousands of entrepreneurs around the world discover the power of intimate retreats to transform their clients' lives and build thriving businesses based on freedom, intuition, and connection. Yes, double yay. So delighted really to have you here today, Darla. And I want to just welcome you and, see if you want to make any opening comments before we dive in a little bit more.
I'm just really present to the power of connection and community right now and the value of our friendship. And so I just want to share that to begin for people who are maybe earlier in business, maybe you are in some kind of program, in some kind of community, you're making these connections, and you might be thinking like, where am I going with this? Is this really helping? Those friendships are going to help you for so many years to come. And so we're a testament to that. So I just really felt like I wanted to start with that.
Beautiful. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's like relationships are so critical. And one of the pillars of feminine sovereignty is collaboration, right? It's collaboration and being able to see that we're not isolated beings in this world, which is kind of the old version of sovereignty. I think of it as a more masculine sovereignty, which is all about autonomy and self-determination. And there's an aspect of that which is vital, especially for women, since we kind of lost our sovereignty under patriarchy, right? And for people of color under colonialism. But we're evolving this feeling about sovereignty to really be about, we're interrelated, we're interdependent, we are. There's a phrase that I learned from Charles Eisenstein. This is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but anyway, called interbeing, which I actually think comes from Thich Nhat Hanh. I think he took it from Thich Nhat Hanh, but he's writing about it. And I love that interbeing, where we really realize, you're spirit, I'm spirit, we're in two different bodies. We have two different histories, but on one level, we're all one big being. Yes. Right? Expressing, we're source energy, we're God expressing through all of these different forms. Yeah. So tell me, Darla, what does sovereignty mean to you? And, how does it show up in your work, in your life? I like to ask everyone this question because it gives us texture about what this kind of big word that's hard to spell. Until you get that rain is in it, and then you got it. But
yes, I have had it auto-corrected a few times. So, it's interesting that you bring forward this idea of the masculine and the feminine, because for me, I think it's a little of both, right? It's that following and trusting your own inner knowing of what's so for you in the face of whatever these external circumstances are, and not being afraid to speak that truth and to behave according to that truth, regardless of what's going on around you. And for me, the feminine aspect of it, because that does feel a little more masculine, right? The feminine aspect of it is being willing to receive feedback, right? And this is something that I've been working on in the last couple of years really intently, is, to receive anything, we have to be willing to receive feedback. Right? It's like opening that channel for reception. And I feel like the feminine way is like, I can share with you in this present moment what's so for me. I can receive what's true for you, and I can decide what fits or doesn't without getting stressed about it, right? Without having to change my way, but being willing to change my way. And that's where the seed of that collaboration comes from. And it's interesting, I'm being interviewed next week about collaboration. And it's like the way we were taught when coming up in our mastermind was very much the masculine transactional approach. And in feminine sovereignty, it's not like, oh, you do this, I'll do this, we'll trade this, but very much how do we presence what's so for us and co-create if there's a match, and not if there's not, and being really honest and truthful about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And not, I like what you just said too. It's not necessarily so transactional. I
Yeah.
think part of what we're evolving out of, I know certainly that I'm committed to, I think you're committed to, is moving beyond that kind of transactional, completely money-based way of just perceiving the whole world, right? Which
Yes.
really is only a few hundred years old. It's not like something that
Yeah.
is totally deeply embedded in us, but it is how our society runs, and so kind of helping to unravel some of that programming that we have around that, so
Yeah.
that we can be available to connect and support, and that it's not about quid pro quo. It's not
Yeah.
like, well, I give you this, you give me that. You get this many clicks, I'll give you that many clicks. Oh my God, really? So yeah, so no, that's great. Gosh, there was something else you said I wanted to pick up on. I can't remember now. Okay.
Well, I was thinking that transactional, or that view of everything through this filter of money, is neither sovereign nor sourced.
Right. Right. Because money is just an idea, really,
Yes.
which we've given an awful lot of power to.
Yes.
Right. But it's not something that actually has an independent existence other than what we
Yeah.
make it to be. Right. Yeah. Well, so
Exactly.
tell me what is sourced? What is sourced energy, and how does that
Yes.
relate to sovereignty? How are you thinking about
Yes.
that?
Yeah. So sourced is my brand. First of all, it's the overarching kind of umbrella in which I'm talking about this different way of living. So it's very, very similar to the way you're talking about sovereignty. It's an approach to life.
Mm.
And so to kind of break it down, source, right, is for me, spirit, God, the universe, collective consciousness, however you want to think about it. It's not religious for me personally, but it could be for someone. But, source is the matter from which we all came. And we come to this planet with a soul, which is a unique slice of source energy. So we're each here to express in a uniquely different way. And my fundamental belief is, if we are all coming from, our unique slice of source energy, the world works, right? We're not in competition because we're all distinct and cooperative and collaborative. So the issue comes in when we are conditioned to operate in a different way, right? And so I've talked about energy for years, but for me, this is all about energy. And so there's two types of energy. There's default energy and there's sourced energy.
Mm.
And this is a tool, this is a way of conceptualizing that's really, really simple, how to tell what's going on with you, how to tell what's going on with your clients. So when we're in default energy, the default has to do with the past, right? What's happened to us in the past, or what beliefs we inherited, ancestrally, culturally, directly from our parents, from trauma. And trauma could be as simple as, my soul is loud and I was constantly told to be quiet, right? That is simple enough to totally put us in a default pattern of behaving the way we feel people want us to behave.
Mm-hmm.
And so this default energy, it's going to feel kind of stagnant, old. It creates we're creating from a stuck place, right? We're literally a lower vibration, or we're more dense. Whereas source energy is like in the present moment. Default energy, we're either living in the past, right? Like, I know I behaved this way before and I survived, and so I'll probably survive if I keep, coming from this energy. So we're either in the past or we're trying to control the future, but we're not actually present. Sourced energy arises in the present moment, and it literally is coming from your soul. It's like, and this is totally simplified. We teach all kinds of methodologies to help people access it, but it's like, who do I feel called to be? Who do I feel called to be? You mentioned earlier way of being, right? Who do I feel called to be? A way of being is an energy. And that energy is usually a lighter vibration. And then we start to see and be drawn to things that match that higher vibration. And it's kind of like law of attraction, right? However, it's more of law of noticing, I would say. When we're at the higher vibration, we actually notice the things that are a match to that. They were always there. It's not like they didn't vibrate in before. It's like they were always there. We just didn't see them.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, and what that makes me think about is, so in human design, right, we've got this blueprint that comes from our birth,
Yes.
and 88 days prior, and it shows us certain things about ourselves. What I always like to say, and I'm just going to remind everybody here, is that you are not your human design. Okay. Your human design is a tool, and it's a map, and it's helpful, and it reveals things, but what it doesn't tell you is how you've lived your life, which is a lot of what you're talking about. Is so that the human design helps us see some of our gifts and talents, our tendencies, things that when we align with our design, and we're really able to be with that, we're able to be sourced. Like that's the way I would say that, right? It's just because we're not fighting ourselves. And when we're not in alignment with our design and we're working against it, whether it's because of conditioning that we've had or because of our epigenetics, our genes are turned off the wrong way because of our ancestral trauma. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that can impact us that then create that stuck part that you're talking about that keeps us kind of like always referring, like you said, like the looking in the rear view mirror, right? Basically, and then projecting that past into our future. So you're always living that way. And I know that, you and I have worked on human design together, and I've done readings for you and for Kimmy. And I'm just wondering if you can just say, so that we can connect a little bit about what you're talking about to folks here who are really interested in design, like how has human design helped you understand source, and how has source helped you understand human design?
Well, when you were sharing, I was thinking of when I first learned of human design, and we were in mastermind together. I was standing at the front of the room for my hot seat, and I just, the question was, well, what do you want that we can help you get, basically, right? And I just started crying. I couldn't think of anything I wanted. So I felt like just this failure, like, I don't know. And I was doing really well. I was working home in my bunny slippers, and like life is going, it was beyond what I could imagine. So I didn't have anything that I could think of. And it was like an internal crisis for me. And I just tears, and I couldn't even, and that's when someone recommended human design. So I learned in my human design so first of all, we can get the whole world of like, gosh, knowing what you want, knowing what you're doing, like knowing, right, is like a default energy for me. Like, oh yeah, I know that. I get that. Like, so not knowing totally was stressful. So I did my human design reading, and the biggest aha for me was understanding that I'm not actually designed to just know what I want. I'm designed to see it and respond, and see it and respond, and see it and respond. And so I could look back at my life and see, oh yeah, the things that really worked beautifully came from that place. But I had a belief that like, that's not proactive, right? That's not like all of these things that I had done to get out of my small town, go to school, be successful, have this amazing career. Like all of those programs were pushing, right? And default energy is like pushing and striving. It's not working with your harmony. And so how I would tie this to this idea of sourced energy sourced energy, like I work with different sourced energies at different times. So I might be working one, like right now I'm working this energy of captivating. And there's a whole process to where that arose for me. And so now, say I'm evaluating an opportunity, right? First of all, I'm not going to stress about having the right answer. And, you know, I'd say 85% of the time, I do a really good job at that. Sometimes I still forget. But I'm not going to stress about having a right answer. I'm going to interact with what comes toward me. And I have a filter, right? Does that make me feel captivating?
Mm.
And then that becomes the decision filter. So
Mm.
I'm evaluating through an energy that I know is true for me,
Nice.
rather than any old kind of approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
So
really.
I mean, you would know better than me around human design, but my take on it is that, you know, our design, it also shows our risks, our risks for running into default patterns. And like if our parents or society or the body we were born in or whatever has an expectation of us to show up in a way that's different than our design, that's where the default shows up.
Well, it's interesting because I just pulled up your chart, and of
Sweet,
course.
I got a reading too.
Well, no, what just really struck me, and I think you and I have talked about this before, but just because you trained as an engineer, right? And you do have that, she has a defined hand in Ajna. But it's interesting because they're defined through the 6124, which is the knowing circuit, not the logic circuit, right?
Mm.
So, and we've talked before about how you have a lot of the knowing circuit and you have a tremendous amount of intuition, but then you do have some strong logic also, which is about patterns. And so I would imagine, I don't know engineering very well, but I imagine it has a lot to do with patterns, right? It has a lot to do with structure and patterns. And I know that when you teach and you create programs and stuff, they're very meticulously structured, and you're really good. Your design in terms of programs is really stellar, which to me relates to that engineer background and that ability to see patterns.
Yeah.
And to know, because patterns and structure kind of go together, right? And
Yep.
you've got the gate of correction, so it's like, okay, it needs to be right. So I know that when you're working with a client, right, you can kind of see, because we all have patterns, right? And patterns aren't necessarily negative, right? We tend to think of them as being negative, but they're not necessarily. We need patterns to be able to function, really. But then it's like being able to see where the pattern is off. And that's the place where I think you're really great at helping people. And what makes a pattern off in part is what we're talking about, which is this programming or this acculturation that leads you away from who you who you are more authentically. I don't really like to use that word very much because it's so overused, but somehow that is really more in alignment with your gifts and talents and your inclinations. And I just want to say that what I see is that you've taken like the kind of the best part of the engineering that you had, and you've taken it and now you're utilizing it in a personal growth world, and in a business world. And that's really helpful because a lot of people who are more drawn to transformational work or personal development work, they need structure a lot because they tend to not be strong in that area, right? Would you say that that's true? Or do you see that with the people you work with?
Yeah. I work with two types of clients. They're either kind of like me, where they have their head in Ajna divine or crown in Ajna, and they're overthinkers. And I actually can help them to relax and feel and be present because I've walked that path. But also people who are more fluid and are drawn to me for the structure. Because I can take, they can just say what, and I can see the patterns and go, oh, this is what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I was thinking about, when you were talking about the patterns, it makes me think of another example. So we've been chatting about quizzes behind the scenes, and I have a quiz, and one of the archetypes is recognition magician. And that's all about seeing patterns. And it makes me think, as people are learning their archetype, they are, the biggest thing that comes up is, I've always known I had this, but I didn't know it was a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it was shamed, and maybe I thought I should shut it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I talk to people virtually every day about that.
Yeah.
Particularly things that are not left-brained, right? Which is
Yes.
like huge, right?
Yes.
Things that are left-brained tend to be fairly well recognized and valued and so on. But things that are right-brained are considered secondary and not significant. But the funny thing about
Yes.
design is that there's 3 primary ways of knowing inside of human design, and logic is only one of them.
Yeah.
The other is knowing, which is that direct connection to source,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is a lot of what your
Yep.
work is. And then the other is sensing, which is through the body and the body wisdom and experience. And
Yeah.
so I love the way that logic only becomes one. It's one of 3, right?
Yeah.
It has a place, but it's certainly not on top or in charge. And so we have these different gifts in these different areas. And I know you and I are both really committed to helping people see the value of them and
Yes.
to cultivate them and to make them a central part of what they do. And I think fortunately,
Yes.
it's way more than when I was a kid. I mean, God, there weren't any schools for intuition when I was a kid.
Right. Right.
And now there are.
And yet there's like the epidemic of undercharging for that magic.
Well,
And, I just feel like we need to put that forward, because that's part of the mission. It's not just knowing, oh, I have this, but if you are a business owner, a practitioner, it's like, why is that not as valuable as someone teaching you a ClickFunnels formula? Like, why do you think that knowledge is worth it, but nobody's going to buy your healing, or nobody's going to buy your ability to. I have a client who's doing a really cool thing. She's having people send them, I'm like, oh, it's so new, I don't want to give it away. But people are sending her something like super, super vulnerable. And she just sees, and she can give them this feedback that's like life-changing, right? And it's like, takes her no time. And the tendency is to say, well, is that valuable? Mm-hmm. Like, it could change. And I'm so passionate about in my work these days, it's like the shift is small and nuanced. So that feedback could change someone, 5 degrees, and it changes their entire life.
Right.
And yet we'd rather pay for someone's like done for you pre-written emails. I just, it's like,
I know.
Infuriating. So
I know. I know. I totally agree.
That said, people have been paying me, and people have been paying Maggie for 10 years to do this stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Although I have to say, I mean, and this was part of what I learned in our mastermind, was that no, I needed to have a different front edge. I mean, I needed to do business coaching and then do the personal development work like inside of that. I mean, that was definitely the message I got and the way I was trained, until I was like, no, actually, I don't want to do it that way anymore. And I think you and I have been on parallel paths to a degree, just in the sense that, because you had the business coaching more out front, you did change it into transformational retreats, which really put the transformation in front. So you got to talk about transformation a lot. And now with Sourced, you've even taken another step to really say, we're going to look at at this energy piece and this connection to the divine as central. And you have to have that in place, in order to have your retreats make sense, right? Or to enroll them or whatever, right? You need to have
Yeah. And, I lost it. I was going to say something about retreats. Oh, even before. So if you had interviewed my clients years before, even though I had the mask of business coaching, right? And it was the Sweet Spot Business Retreat was my first retreat, if you remember that, with all of the binder and the PowerPoints. And people didn't buy for business advice. they bought for transformation. And I know it 100%. I know it all the time, every time. Right. But to your point, the front end, would they have come to retreat for that? I can't say, but I'm 100% certain that's what I was selling. I wasn't pretending to sell something else, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think I wasn't as clear as you were. Although it's really interesting, even in this decade, Darla, like I see people now, because I started out with soul inspired business, right? And soul signature marketing, and nobody was doing that back then. I mean, I was really kind of an anomaly, you know, and I mean, and our coach didn't really know what to do with me, frankly. She was like, what do I do with you?
You can't say soul.
Nobody knows what that means. Yeah.
Call it make money.
I know. It was even worse than that. She was like, sovereignty? Nobody can spell it. No. Anyway, enough of that. Blessings. So Darla, tell us why, I'm just looking at some of the things that we said we were going to talk about today. Why a single, because I find this really interesting, why a single energy could be coming from a sovereign place in one person and totally not in another. That's fascinating to me.
Yes. And this, I'm really, really passionate about this because, you know, there's scales for energy, right? And we learn like, oh, this peace vibrates at da-da-da, or joy vibrates at da-da-da. Yes, and it depends on how you're relating to it. So I think back to when I created my very first sourced energy. It was like early on. I think it was before we met, for sure. I was just starting out, or just before I was starting. I was in that like waffly phase of like, am I doing a business or not? And I started to recognize that I was saying yes to everybody else but myself. And that the way that this pattern would work out was, I would think, so I had a belief, I can't be selfish, right? Coming from, my mom used to call me ungrateful. I still, to this day, I'm like, I have no idea why, but apparently I was ungrateful. Like, I don't know. I thought I was delightful, but she used to call me ungrateful, and I would get so upset, right? And I'd always constantly be justifying myself, like, I'm, 15, 16. And so I decided, like, that's really, really bad. You should always give. And so I would say yes, and I would say yes, and I would say yes to things until my schedule was so overbooked, I couldn't possibly do it all. And then I would break down, and I would need to ask people for help, or I would need to cancel or whatever, because I was so full. And then I ended up looking selfish, right? So it's like, I can't be selfish. But by the way, here I am being selfish, right? And so the possibility, this sourced energy that I lived with, was around really being greedy for myself. Like, that's how I called it, greedy for myself. And it was like a whole light bulb for me to say, like, I could do that. Now, it might seem obvious, right? But from within our filter, it's like as if you've never heard it before. So that energy could be really, really default for someone, right? Like, maybe they grew up where it's like, if I don't take it, I don't get it, right? So I'm just going to be greedy. And that would be default for them. For me, it was breakthrough. It was like, wow, like the skies parted. It was like everything changed. So the same word, right, for example, can bring forth different types of energies depending on how we relate to it. And so there can be like this tendency to have an affirmation, right? I'm beautiful, I'm free, but like, it depends on how someone relates to it, whether it's actually sourced or whether it's just keeping them in that default pattern.
Right.
And I can share another example. When I'm trained as an energy leadership master practitioner. And when I went through the training, there's an assessment, and I use this assessment still. And I got a really low score, which of course hurt my ego. It was like, what? I'm not like amazing. And when I looked at the back end at the results, because I could see all the questions, I could see that every question about success were the ones that caused me to have a lower score. And so I was like starting to get curious about this. What's that about? Well, for me, my interpretation of success, having come from the corporate world and gotten promoted and worked my way up, and it was like, okay, I have success, I'm empty. So the way I held success was kind of negative. It was like, oh, I don't want that. I don't give a shit about that. And so the way I would answer the questions then reflected that.
Mm. Yeah.
So someone else would hear success and be like, woo, yay. And I was hearing it differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you're talking about our associations with different concepts or different words,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
More
what
so than energy.
more so than energy. Okay, that makes more sense to me because that's totally
Yep.
true, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things you and I are both about is helping our clients to move out of or move beyond socially prescribed notions of success and to create
Yeah.
their own, whatever they are,
Yes.
because success is really it's really different to different people,
Yes.
which is really what you're
And
saying, right?
it's kind of hard to create your own definition when you're angry at the word, right?
Well, there's
So
that.
I mean, that was my takeaway. It's like, look at this, being angry at success is really costing me energy, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, but it's a stage, right? Because it's
Yeah.
developmental, right? Because you
Mhm.
needed to kind of question it and reject it for a little bit in order to break free of probably of its
Exactly.
hold over you, right?
Exactly.
So, but then you want to keep moving and not just stay there because then that becomes another default
Yeah.
energy, right?
Exactly. And you don't want to be reactive to it and say, oh, I was negative about success, I should be positive about success, I should like that. These are opposite ends of the same
Right,
spectrum and you're still trapped.
right.
So the question is like, I call this a magic question. It's one of the things I train on. I've started to talk about going to another planet, so I'll use that one. If you went to a whole new planet and the word success didn't exist in their language, like if there were no such thing as success or failure, like who would you be?
Mm.
And what arises in that space, that's sourced. There's like no, it's not coming from any preconceived notion.
Nice. Yeah. And I actually think that I just, what I immediately felt when you said that is I think the experience of life without that polarity is intrinsic to human life.
Mm.
I think
Mm.
that the creation of success and failure is not intrinsic to human life
Mm. Right.
at all, really. You know,
Well, we're created with egos, so the ego creates it, but it's not creating more life.
it's
It's
not
not
creating
it's not
more.
creative.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because it's all that is really is a scale of judgment,
Yeah.
right? Is how do you know if it's successful? How do you know if it's a failure?
Right.
What have you, what are you ascribing
Exactly.
to that to be able to say it's this or that? Yeah.
Exactly.
And
And I love that you said that because it makes me think, so the way that this is personal to us, it depends on which scales we've built. Like, what are your scales of judgment, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So for example, if someone grew up in a household where they were told like, don't cry, smile, be happy, and that was the vibe, then the idea of joy could hold a negative connotation. They might have a scale about it, right? Am I being joyful enough? Am I not? And there might be judgment around it.
mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And some people have no scale around that.
Right. My dad used to call that the disease of cheerfulness
Yes.
because he was brought up to be cheerful. My
Yeah,
dad's
he
not
would.
really a very cheerful guy.
Well, okay, perfect, because it's opposite ends of the same coin, right? Like as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, that means he's trying not to be cheerful, right? But he's still stuck. So now he's opposite, but it's the same path. So when we're stuck on, I call it the old tired path. everything that comes at us is either cheerful or not, cheerful or grumpy, or however you would describe his vibe, right? And it's like, or cheerful or cynical or something like that. And now everyone's getting judged on that.
Yeah.
Unless we free ourselves from it. And so it just becomes a small existence, right?
Yeah.
Because if everyone is either this or that, they're either selfish or generous, they're either, and we all have these, right? Then we're not free. We're not in the present moment to really receive who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because all we see is that.
Yeah. Well, we've got some pretty elaborate filters for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, so how can, let's see, I'm really interested in this one. What's the secret benefit of non-productive energy? What does that mean even? What's non-productive? I mean, I can imagine, but so what's non-productive energy and what's the secret benefit of it?
Well, so the default energy is non-productive, right? We're just like Groundhog Day, having the same experience over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So the secret benefit is we get to stay comfortable. We get to feel safe. We get to have the illusion of control, right? It's like I think about one of the reasons I'm so passionate about retreats is because you can create experiences that people have never had. And if we know we're going to do something, so everybody think about if you get invited to a party with a group of people and you only know one person and it's a big group. Okay, just imagine that. You immediately start thinking about your strategies to survive. Immediately, I'm going to stay by the appetizer, buffet, or I'm going to stick with my one person, or I'm going to go be the funny one, or like we all have these strategies, and then we get a result that we know will survive. And that's really the benefit. And like, as a coach, we have to keep doing this work, because I know every single person, if you're a coach or healer or whatever, you've come to this moment where you're intuiting something with your client that if you spoke it would give them freedom, but if you don't, you stay safe. Right? Because speaking it risks they might not like you, they might be triggered, they might react in some way, their pattern may show up. And so we have to keep doing this work. But it's a lot safer to be like, yay, woohoo, okay, great, I'm going to smile and cheer you on, even though I intuitively know it's not going to work because your energy's off.
Right.
But it stays safe.
Right. It's so funny when I hear you say that. I think it's my gate 51, because I'm so completely not that way. I'm just like that gate of shock and initiation is deeply, I have a very deep groove to that particular energy of being like, I'm noticing this.
I'm pretty sure I have it too.
Do you have that in your chart? You do. You have it in your chart too.
Yeah. But I think I must have something also that makes it real nice. I can deliver it really nice.
Yeah, you have the 27, so that could make it nice. Plus, you have a tremendous amount of heart energy. Like your G center is, fully defined, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got like 5, 6, 5 gates, and one's hanging. So it's like, yeah, you got tons and tons and tons of heart energy. But I knew that already. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
See, I've got provocation. Do you have provocation? Yes, you don't have provocation.
I don't know.
I think for me, having, shock and provocation, it's like, fortunately, I've kind of learned how to manage it, but it's been an intense ride to have that kind of energy. If anything, I'm the other way around. It's like I could use a little more of that, don't say that right now. Maybe that's not the right time. Like, wait until it's the right, It's the open throat blurting out.
Right.
So how do we save time by shifting our energy?
So essentially, I want to really connect this idea of sourced energy to leading sourced. So when you were talking at the top of the hour, Maggie, about our experience in Mastermind and how you kind of got off track from yourself, right? Here's how I survived that experience. And I call it survived because there were parts of it that were really tough. I did all the things our coach told me to do, And I also did all the things my intuition told me to do. And so I was like doing a lot of things. I was hustling, like hustling. Um, when we're source, when we're coming from this energy, like I said, we can evaluate opportunities. First of all, like, is that a match to this energy? So we don't have to be constantly thinking or waiting, you know, for spirit to give it to us, because it actually is spirit coming through us to be this energy. But we save time because we know what's ours. We know
Mm-hmm.
a match, we know who we are. And the more we practice this, the easier it is to receive from source and have that divine guidance.
Right.
So the energy piece, to me, helps anchor it. It makes it easier and more accessible for people to start to be sourced, right? So if you're saying, I'm free, love, freedom, and empowerment were my first kind of, when I started my business, those were my guiding energies. Then I can start to say, does this bring more love, freedom, empowerment to myself and the world, or does it not? And then that gives spirit like a really clear way to communicate with us. Because when you just say, hey, spirit is guiding you, which I 100% believe, and your truth is always available, that guidance is always there, and someone's not practiced at it, it can be so frustrating, right? Like, is that source? Is it not? Is that my ego? Is it spirit? I don't know. Should I? Shouldn't I? I want the answer now, but maybe I need to wait. But like, that's hard. And so the energy piece just really helps make it easier and more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And
And when you
spirit will
say,
give you spirit will give you that exact thing, that's a match. Like when you're in that energy, it's just like flowing to you, because you're telling spirit, I'm going to recognize it.
mm,
I'm open. I am going to receive it. I'm going to recognize it. And so
mm-hmm.
just, it's an anchor.
Mm-hmm. And so I just want to make sure I understand. So are you saying, when you said love, freedom, and empowerment, you're talking about those being particular types of energies that
Yes.
you are connecting to? And so when you receive some kind of guidance, you're able to be like, okay, is it in alignment with one of these or
Yeah,
all of these?
exactly.
And then that, yeah, because it's interesting to think of them as, they are energies. I think of them as
Mm-hmm.
values, energies. And so it's like a criteria that you have that
Yeah.
helps you to be able to discern. Because that's the thing I think that's also really important for all of us, we're learning, is to be able to move out of judgment, but to sharpen our discernment. Because we
Yes.
still have to make distinctions,
Yes.
right? It's not like
Yes.
we just go, oh, everything's good, it's all good. Like every time everybody says something to me about it's all good, I'm like, no, please don't say that to me anymore. It's like, no, we actually do need to be discerning, and we need to have
Yeah.
values, and we need to make our
Yeah.
decisions about what our consciously have filters, right? Because really, in
Yeah.
a way, you're talking, saying these are these are the filters I've chosen. They're not my default filters. They're
Right.
actually ones that I've chosen that are helping me to be able to discern
Yes.
my connection to source and my connection to my body and to each other, to other people and my work and all of that. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
100%. The only
Okay.
thing I would add is, when we say values, our values, I feel, are kind of long term. Like they
Mm,
might change a little over time, but it's kind of consistent, right? The energy could change. The energy that's alive for you will change over time. And the other thing about thinking of values, we go to our head,
mm,
right? And we start thinking about corporate values and what does that mean? And what's the definition? And is it right? And is it not? I don't know if anybody else has done this, but I have. Whereas the energy, it's just like, how does it feel to me? It's your personal definition. How does that feel to me? So if you're going to translate to values, that would kind of be a different thing, because values are like, you want to empower your customers or your team or other people to understand it, whereas the energy is like, does this feel alive for me?
okay. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. So, and what it makes me think of is, so the way that I talk about aligning with your design is that when you are in alignment, not only do you have all of your own energy available, right? Because
Mhm.
you're not fighting yourself, or you're not trying to
Yeah.
make yourself go somewhere else, or you're not saying no to yourself when your body and your being is saying yes, right? You're not fighting, you don't have that resistance. So just removing the resistance, all of a sudden you have so much more energy. But
Yes.
in addition to that, you also are plugged in, because your design is part of the way that you have a deal, is the word that came to mind. I don't really mean that. An agreement with the universe, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to
Mm,
come into a body. I'm going to have this human experience. I'm going to, express myself in certain ways. I'm going to manifest my life. I'm going to have these lessons, all of that, and I want certain things guaranteed, right? I want certain things guaranteed. And that's what your design is, right? It's like, okay, you're going to have
mm,
these things that are going to be available to you. But like what I was just saying about provocation and shock, you might have to learn how to work with those energies, because they can work
yeah.
you if you're not aware. But so you have this kind of agreement with source that lies in your design. And so when you're like, okay, I'm in alignment with that, not only do you have all the energy from your own motors, but all of a sudden it's like whoosh, the whole flow of life is available to you too. And when you really learn the right timing, this is one of the reasons I was interested about the saving time, right? Because when
Yeah.
you are attuned to right timing, then things happen like that.
Yeah.
And when you're not, you can feel like you're just frigging, climbing the mountain forever, right? Because
Yes.
you don't have the flow of life behind you.
Yes.
Um, so that's one way I think about saving time. It's like when it's the right time, and for you and I, we're generators, so we ask our sacral, right?
Yeah.
That it's at the right time, and it's like, oh, mm-hmm, or mm-mm. Your mind's going,
Yeah.
but wait, I had a plan, and your sacral's going, mm-mm.
Yeah. Timing is the one that's the edge for me. Because as a seer and a pattern recognizer, right? It's like, well, I know what's going to be hot. Like, I just know. So I want to do it now, so I'm ahead. But that's not really how my design works. So,
Well, yeah, and just because you get the idea doesn't mean it's the right time.
exactly.
Just because you see
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
Um,
And I've learned that over and over. So anyone listening who's resonating with that, it's like I've proven that to myself so many times.
it's that jump into action.
Yeah, just because you have it now does not mean it's the right time.
Yeah. All right, dear. Well, we are coming up on the end of our hour, and I just want to see if there's anything else that you want to talk about.
I was just going to share, I was thinking this morning about what I would want to share with people if they want to learn more about my work, et cetera.
Absolutely.
And I don't have like one thing that's directly tied to this particular video, but I have a page on my site, sourcedexperience.com/resources. And there's free audio about what is a sourced experience, these experiences in life that catapult us from default to sourced energy. And there's a couple other tools, and there's a link to my YouTube channel, which has like 5 new videos so far. So I'm really building a lot of things right now, and I'm editing my new book, and it's coming out soon. But that's the place to go, find something that interests you and hop on my list if it feels right.
And is there a way that they can, I mean, I guess if they get on your list anyway, through any of those, they'll find out about when your book comes out. But do you have an
Yes.
advance notice about your book, a thing where people can sign up for that? Or, well, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, well, today I have a call with my book coach to kind of go back through the edits and shift things. So I
Are
actually wrote
those
my
your edits or somebody else's edits that you got?
um so I'm working with my book coach, and she provided some developmental edits. I sat with them for a while and like, oh, this feels good. Oh, I'm not sure about this. What does this book really want to be? Because I wrote it this summer, and I wrote it with an audience. I like did a book study, and I sent out sections of the book as I wrote them for accountability and feedback and feeling the energy and what are they getting from it. And then when it's done, it's like, oh, now what does it really want to be? Right. I had so many ahas in the process of writing it. So this is the second call for me to digest the feedback and go, okay, what does this really want to be? So to tell you about it, it's based on this premise of source versus default energy. However, I teach what I call an anatomy of a transformation, which is how do you actually help someone shift from one to the other? And how do you do it in a way that it unlocks your intuitive magic rather than like a formulaic way? It's like, how can you lean into this structure, right? My engineering brain creates structure. How can you as a service provider lean into this structure and trust your intuition because you know what's happening? Like you have an awareness of what's happening with your clients. So you can let like channeling come through, and then you can come back and go, oh, okay, so what did that do? Where did that move them in this process? So that's what I'm super excited about. I think it's going to be a really helpful tool for people.
It sounds awesome. It sounds awesome. I can't wait to read it.
Well, March is my goal. So
March is your goal. Well, maybe you'll come back and tell us about it when it's ready and people can go get it.
I would love to.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Because I've been hearing you talk about it for a while, and, you know, kind of in the writing and all that. And yeah, so I'm excited about it. I think it is going to be really helpful for people. And one thing I want to say is, you know, in this, you know, our world is undergoing a lot of transformation right now. And where we're going to be in just in a short period of time is very different than where we've been. And we're already been experiencing that this year. I mean, this year has been kind of unbelievable. I guess I'll just say it's been kind of unbelievable. And what I think people are really going to need is they're going to need more support to be able to have the transformations that they need to have, that maybe they've been putting off or they knew they needed to have, or they just know, okay, yeah, I've been in transformation for years, but there's, you know, these places I haven't gotten to, you know, or this whole thing is calling me to another level. I mean, I feel like I'm continually being called to another level, even though I've been in personal growth for most of my life, you know? So I think having more tools about how you can actually support someone to have that, and support yourself, of course, right, is going to be enormously beneficial for people. So, and I'm glad that you're mapping it out, because you're really good at that kind of thing.
And it, you know, it's like having that kind of, it lifts you, it supports you, so you can continue to develop different tools for how you actually work. Like it's not a, you know, you learn this technique and then that's the only thing you do. It's a structure. So like for me, you know, I think I've told you, I keep getting messages about healing with my hands, and I've been getting them for a while, and I've started using my hands to move energy and heal. And it's like, I can do that and I can add that into my work seamlessly. It creates more value, but it's not a whole different thing. It's still in the same structure.
Right. And Darla, I'm just writing over here on Facebook. Is your site sourcedexperience.com?
Yep.
Sourced Experience. Okay. Just because I wasn't sure if it was Sourced Experience or Sourced Energy, but I was pretty sure it was Sourced Experience. Okay, good.
Yep.
Great, dear. Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap up, but I really want to thank you. I always learn so much from you when we chat. I just love that. And I want to encourage those of you who are on Zoom now and on Facebook and watching the replay later to go to sourcedexperience.com/resources and go get some goodies from Darla, because you will be glad that you did. All right, dear. Well,
thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.